So as part of the Monaco Ocean Week, it's a great pleasure to welcome you here. I think I can recognize scientists, people from NGOs, from the socio-economic stakeholders in general, and students. And it's exactly this diversity that we want to show here, the force of diversity in marine conservation. The main topic you see behind me, comprehensive conservation. What is that? It's actually, it aims to protect at the same time marine ecosystems, but also to empower local communities, local populations.
And these two objectives are intertwined, as the health and resilience of marine ecosystems are closely linked to the people that rely on those ecosystems. Protecting marine ecosystems involves a range of strategies, from regulating fishing and aquaculture to establishing marine protected areas and minimizing pollution. These measures are crucial for preserving biodiversity and maintaining the ecosystem services that support coastal communities and their livelihoods. Science shows that well-managed marine protected areas work to protect, restore, and increase the ecosystems and their associated services.
So at the same time, comprehensive conservation, if you want to join me, Nikita, comprehensive conservation recognizes also that coastal communities are often the stewards of marine resources. Their participation of the coastal communities is essential for successful conservation efforts. So it's today to combine these scientific and socio-economic aspects. That's why we're here. And so before we start, I just want to remind you that this event is so live and broadcasted. And let's now introduce the speakers today. So Cécile Saboureau first. Cécile Saboureau at Université Côte d'Azur is full professor, vice president for international affairs, and the director of the Ecosys Lab. Oh, it's going to be long, but...
Also at the Université Côte d'Azur, we have Benoît Derrijar, who is also a researcher at CNRS.
And Timothée Cook from Blue Seeds, science officer.
And Coco Tamlin, who is the director at Coral Guardian.
Also at Coral Guardian, Florina Jacob, who is a field and scientific manager.
We have Florent Favier, who is a consultant in communication and ecological transition, as well as the creator of Catalyst.
And Nikita Rose, at Université Côte d'Azur, she is a Mares student from the MSc Mares.
And then Christophe Maquet, who works at the Université Côte d'Azur and is the director of our program Mares.
So our 5 headlines today will be the science of marine conservation with Ecosys, how to make marine conservation more efficient with Blue Seeds. We'll learn also how to find the success story in Indonesia and see also a comparison with Spain, with Coral Guardian. We'll compare social acceptability on land and at sea with Florent Favier, and we'll talk about the need of interdisciplinarity in education to create the solutions of the future. So we can take a seat and start with the first part, the science of marine conservation. So scientific research provides the necessary data, what we need to understand and protect marine ecosystems, and to develop effective conservation strategies. Science proves that marine conservation and marine protected areas are essentials for safeguarding biodiversity, promoting ecosystem resilience, and supporting sustainable fisheries. We'll start with Cécile Saboureau and Benoît Derrijar.
So hi everyone. Thank you to be here because it's very complicated today to reach Monaco. So I will take a very broad perspective to explain a little bit what we are doing at Université Côte d'Azur and in the Ecosys Lab. And why I will do that, because I would like to emphasize that we want to, of course, we want to protect ecosystems, we want to empower populations, and within the population, we want to empower stakeholders and policymakers. And that's why I want to explain you today. So the first thing is that at Université Côte d'Azur, we have rebuilt our university since 2020 to build new territorial ecosystem. And of course, we have one dedicated to marine resources, and the aim is to bring together all the expertise on that field and to bring together the research and innovation and of course also education, and to do that with all the parties that are available on the territory. And this structure is relying on a strong link with the local ecosystems, of course. That means that we are working strongly with the local authorities and also with companies, operators, NGOs, and so on. And for example, we have built what we have called the Institute, the Federative Research Institute for Marine Resources. And the aim is to bring together all research expertise on the territory. So you have here all the research labs from Université Côte d'Azur, and of course you have the Ecosys lab, but we also have a different expertise, and we can work together on, of course, marine ecology, but also social sciences, biology, law, economy, chemistry, physics, and so on. And the aim is to bring a transdisciplinary approach, to have a transdisciplinary framework, and this will be explained also by Christophe and Nikita for education. The aim is to work as in the whole ecosystem, also with strongly with companies and with local authorities to develop research, and also, of course, all this transdisciplinary framework will conduct to innovation, and that's what we are doing here, and we are using this with to develop new strategies. And last but not least, the aim is to bring the science and innovation to stakeholders and to policymakers. And for that, we developed also a strong strategy of scientific diplomacy. For example, we are involved in the climate change COP and biodiversity COP, and you have here the UNFCCC, the last COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, where we were to provide the science and innovation and to deliver this science-based evidence to negotiators, but also to stakeholders, NGOs, and of course to policymakers. And this is what we think is really important to be able to bring all these people together to protect and to conserve our marine ecosystems. And now we'll give the floor to Benoit, and he will explain a little bit more about our projects in the Ecosys Lab. Thank you.
Merci, Cécile. Good morning, everybody. Thanks to Christophe and Mares for this invitation. So I will just tell you a little bit about two of our projects that are related to marine conservation. One is a field project with a lot of diving and fisheries and so on, and another one which is a communication project rather. So the Recife project was the first one, and the idea with this project was to do standardized monitoring of 8 no-take zones that are spread in the department, the east of the Var department and the Alpes-Maritimes. These are shown here on the slide. Presented these different no-take zones. They are from various sizes, but they are spread almost evenly on the coast. The idea was to evaluate the spillover effect within these MPAs, and also since some of them have artificial reef, also the effect of these reefs. and we are monitoring the fauna during 2 seasons, cold season and warm season for each of these. And the idea is also to establish, as shown on the picture on the right, to establish a dialogue with the fishermen, to try to understand their needs, what they expect, and then to set up the basis of future collaborations. The idea, obviously, is to convince all the stakeholders about the benefits of setting up MPAs. Okay, so how do we monitor the fauna? So we use the three methods. One is the first one is the classical underwater visual censuses that is shown on the left side of the slide. And so basically we are doing a transect underwater, and we are counting, identifying the fishes, counting them, and measuring their size. And this allows us to deduce a lot of the diversity, the biomass, and so on. And we are also doing experimental fisheries with the local fishermen to involve them in this project. And when they come back to the harbor, we monitor the size of the fishing, the species, and so on. So this is more commercial species, obviously. And then we are doing complemental analysis, which is the environmental DNA, which is a very strong tool to study biodiversity. For this, we do sampling on the surface of the water and underwater, as shown with this small picture of the diver with the scooter and the pump that is sampling the DNA. So the idea, as I said, was so the assessment were done during 2 seasons with the 3 techniques I just introduced, and so. C'est bon? Ah, là, c'est pas bon. OK.
Something's changed.
Yeah. Oh, well. Sorry. Non, c'était pas les bons. On n'a pas le retour. Bon. Okay, so to summarize this project, so we did a lot of sampling effort. We had more than 500 UVC within this 8 no-take zone. So it's about 15 days of sampling per campaign. So you have to double this for the 2 campaigns each year. So that was a lot of dives, and the experimental fisheries was about 500 as well, fisheries that were done for this project, and the DNA analysis. We analyzed approximately 60 DNA samples. That's about 10,000 sequence per sample, and we identified 110 species. Approximately. So the idea of this project is to obviously to be able to repeat it regularly, to have an idea of the evolution of these parameters, biodiversity, biomass within these MPA. The other project I would like to tell you about is the Fish MPA Blue project. So this project was initially launched in 2015. It concerns the first step was to analyze the needs, the requirement, and the way to work of 31 Mediterranean fishery MPAs. From this analysis, we designed a toolbox that offered 12 management measures for the fishermen, the managers, every stakeholders involved in these MPAs. And in the second phase, 11 MPAs from 5 different countries were recruited. So the idea is to, I'm not sure if I should move or not. The goal.
Yeah, you're on it.
Yeah, I know. Well, now it's missing half of the, but it doesn't matter. So the idea is to build a bottom-up approach rather than the classical top-down approach, which quite often fails to involve the stakeholders, because there's low involvement of the stakeholders when it's a really top-down approach. So the idea was really to involve everybody, the diving clubs, the tourism, the fishermen, try to involve as much people as possible into this co-management, the co-management of these MPA. So the expected results of this project was to obviously increase to improve the management of these MPA by increasing the biodiversity and the quality of the ecosystems with more fishes and crustacean invertebrates, which have usually larger size individuals. The benefit is also for the artisanal fishermen, because they have more fish and more crustacean to catch. So that increases also their revenues. That was not additional. Oh, no, it's not showing up. Okay, but anyway, so the fishermen can usually increase their income by 4 to 5 when they fish around an MPA, because they benefit from the spillover effect. So the last step of this Fish Empire Blue project was the plus version, which was held last year, and the idea was to transfer this toolkit to 11 new MPA in the Mediterranean. And as far as we are concerned, the MPAs were Capdai and Peckrol, and well, I hope we involve them as we wish they could get involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Benoit. Before we go ahead, the idea is, so of course we will open the floor to questions for you. I would like to come back first about that idea that you talk about science, natural science, but also exchange with fishermen. So it involves social science. Can I ask you already what's, it's not that it's prepared, but can you explain a little bit how natural scientists in a lab like EcoSys, they work with social scientists or in social science in general? How is it easy, maybe another parallel question, to go talk with the fishermen and when we are in a lab most of the time?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit complicated. It's a voluntary démarche, the way to try to get social science involved in this scientific project, because we are convinced that you cannot build an MPA that will work if you don't involve all the people, if they don't feel part of the project. So that's a crucial aspect. We should. The MPAs, the fishermen have been excluded for a long time. They often felt imposed rules and regulation that they don't know about. They don't comply with easily. So it was a necessary way for us to try to improve this. And we went to see them. We have discussion with them. We build questionnaires. And we do that together with them, trying to go slowly. You have to be very patient with the fishermen, yeah. And trying not to impose.
I think this bottom-up idea and top-down idea will be, I think, really the key word a lot with Blue Seeds and also with Coral Guardian, with you also on land. So we've seen that we are talking about a work combining a lab on site, and also the idea at the end is not only, once again, to better understand the ecosystem or to protect the fish there, but really to, you'd say that the fishermen can also find more fish around to capture. So this is really useful, of course, to get the stakeholders engaged, and I think it's a good transition. So you want to add something, Cécile? Sorry.
I wanted just to add that that's where the transdisciplinary approach is really useful, because we are working with economists, with social scientists, and with lawyers also. So yeah, the MPA is a really nice example of what we can do all together, and we need all expertise.
Yeah. And I see that we have representatives from the Metropole of Nice or from Monaco. So I'm happy that we can engage the discussion after. We can go to you, Timothée. So Timothy Cook has a doctorate in marine biology and is a research associate at the University of Cape Town. He worked on the ecology of top predators, birds, if I remember, but it's written here. And actually, voilà, I'm smiling and I lose the track. So you have experience lecturing at a university level. You're working also with NGO to promote sustainable fisheries practices, not to name the NGO. And today, Timothée, so you're at Blue Sea, that's a science officer, training manager also of marine protected areas. And you're researching solutions to increase effectiveness of marine conservation. I guess we'll talk about finance, but not only.
Hello, thank you, Christophe. Okay. At Blue Seas, we often talk about increasing the efficiency of marine conservation because when we listen to Benoit, it sounds like we've got an easy solution. You put a marine protected area in the ocean, you draw a circle, and bingo, you have fish that come out of the marine protected area. And that's the spillover effect that Benoit was talking about, and that is illustrated in this. It's now a pretty famous illustration of that spillover effect. I like it, so I show it every time. Okay. So what Benoit was talking about was that indeed they do when they're well managed, and well managed means also well financed. Provides lots of benefits for biodiversity, species, and habitats. What Benoit also mentioned is that when they're well managed, they, through this spillover effect, provide lots of benefits for the local communities. So in particular, the fisheries you were mentioning, but not only the fisheries, okay? So we often think about marine protected areas as a tool to enhance biodiversity and therefore resources for the fishermen. That is very important, but let's remember that marine protected areas also are a way of providing benefits for the communities, not just the fishermen, through activities like tourism, because if your environment is degraded, if the ocean is totally collapsed, there is no more interest for tourists, okay? So you're killing the goose. You want the golden egg, but if you kill the goose, you won't have any more golden eggs. Okay, so you have to keep the goose alive. And then, so finally, things we often tend to forget about protecting the ocean is indirect benefits, such as cultural benefits or benefits for your well-being. And these fit into the identity benefits as fisheries, as tourism, but they have less to do with the socio-economic sector. So yes, so fishermen and the surrounding communities benefit from marine protected areas, meaning they need to be involved, okay? So they need to be involved. So the question I have for us, for me, for you today, that we think about all the time at Blue Seas is how do you get them involved? How do you help fishermen and the communities get involved in marine conservation? And so actually that is a tricky question. So I just want to quickly explain to you what we do at Blue Seas. At Blue Seas, so Blue Seas is a young structure that was founded thanks to a generous grant of the Mother Foundation. And generally speaking, we work on financing solutions for marine conservation, finding solutions to fund those activities that are important for protection. And also we work on finding solutions to increase management effectiveness of conservation projects. And so interestingly, the origin of Blue Seeds was the study by Thomas Binet, the president and founder of Blue Seeds, on the financing gap of marine protected areas in the Mediterranean. So it's called the financing gap because you have objectives. Your marine protected area is supposed to meet certain objectives, requirements in terms of what it's able to deliver, its coverage at the Mediterranean level, and we're not there. We're not there in France, we're not there in Libya, we're not there in Morocco, we're not there in Greece. Okay, so there is a gap and it needs to be filled. So it was at the time 700 million euros a year. It's probably around 2.5 billion euros a year. It's actually nothing compared to what the benefits are and to the general gross domestic product of all the countries we're talking about. So Blue Seeds regularly helps protected area managers identify their financing gap, reduce costs, or develop management solutions for their activities. Okay. Oh yes, and so Blue Seeds wrote a guide on financing mechanisms to help fund marine conservation projects, marine protected areas in particular. So this map just shows an example of where we have been deploying some of those solutions in the Mediterranean in 2022. We've been working on entrance fees, so getting funds from paying visitors for access to marine protected areas in some of the sites that are shown on the map here. We've been actually on the recently declared Vjosa park in Albania, which is the last wild river of Europe, was just recently declared a national park. We helped define the financing strategy of that park. And also, for those of you who like boating, we have developed an application called Blue Mooring, which helps managers who have mooring zones in the marine protected area manage those zones and use their resources more intelligently than for just spending their time managing boaters and their mooring zone. So different solutions, and finding solutions necessitates research. So on this page we have we have two examples of research projects by Blue Seeds on blue carbon finance. Blue Seeds, before we deploy our solutions, we want to make sure they actually are, they work. And for this, we need to get literally our hands and our feet dirty in the mud. On the left, there is an illustration of a project run by Fernando Ruiz, which I saw is in the room, I think. On carbon finance for protecting Posidonia oceanica in the Mediterranean. And then on the right, a project for protecting mangroves in West Africa. These are at a research stage, but within the controversial context of carbon finance today, we want to make sure we get things absolutely right before we try to deploy them anywhere else than at pilot sites. So research is key. Okay, and so once we are sure of ourselves, one of the ways we deliver our solutions is through training programs. So Blue Seeds does a lot of training, and that's something I'm personally deeply involved in. I love it. You go out in the field, but you meet people mostly. So here are a few pictures of us training managers and staff of marine protected areas in West Africa, Guinea, Mauritania, but also in the Mediterranean, on financial planning, financial strategies, effectiveness. And so, yes, we've been deeply involved in this activity, and it's where we learn the most about what's going on out there and the needs of managers. And it's also very rewarding because you actually talk to people instead of talking to your computer screen. Okay. Yes, and finally, you are much more effective and impactful if you are not alone. If you're part of a network, of a partnership, and one of the tasks of Blue Seeds is to be the secretariat of the partnership Together for the Med, which is a partnership of projects that aim to reduce fishing pressure on marine biodiversity in the Mediterranean. So if you're interested in understanding who and what Together for the Med is, I invite you to go and check it out online. So do you remember the question I had asked at the beginning?
Is this test?
Do you remember, Christophe?
I don't know.
No?
I was not listening.
I wrote it down. How can we help fishers and communities get involved in marine conservation? So how can we help them? Okay, so and for that you need an incentive. So it's sad, but it's the way it works. You need money, but you can't spend money just in any way. Okay, so the incentive is money, but the incentive is how can you spend the money? If you give money to a fisherman, he's going to buy a new engine. And is that the answer to a more sustainable fishing practice? It is not. So it has to come with a deal. Okay, the deal is I will give you money on the condition that you do spend it in a way that we are sure is going to be a sustainable shift. Okay, so Blue Seas was tasked to study the effectiveness of a project developed by a Moroccan NGO called Agir and Alosema MPA, so northern Morocco. And they had a very interesting project initiative, is that they had a capital of money, they used it as a fund, and this fund is called a revolving fund. So what they did is that they enabled fishermen to use money from that fund. Like, let's say, for example, they started with 50 fishermen. They were able to change their gear to sustainable, biodegradable, selective gear. In this case, it's called NAS in French. It's made from a very resistant type of weed. Or they are called pods in English, I think. So it's very selective. And instead of that, they're not using what they used to use in those parts, which was dynamite in some instances, but also drift nets, more commonly long lines or bottom trawling. Okay, so once they had been able to shift their gear using that money from the fund, they were able to reimburse their fund at the fish market through the sale of their product, and by doing so, eventually refill their part of the fund, and that money was available to fund another fisherman to change his gear. Okay, so fishermen don't always have a lot of money. Usually they have no treasury, no cash. So based on this actually very successful project, Blue Seas decided to develop its own fund, revolving fund. And so we're currently going to deploy a fund called Blue Move in the European waters. It's a lot more complicated, although having said that, I'm not entirely sure. It's different, it's very bureaucratic. So it's called Blue Move. It's thanks to the generous contribution of an exit grant of the MAVA Foundation, and it's in partnership with WWF. And I'm going to show you on the screen a very, very, very simplified version of what this mechanism is. So it's actually very complicated because we're dealing with Europe. But the idea is that in Europe, there's the Fisheries Fund, and it has actually a lot of money for small-scale fishermen, a lot of money. But they do not access this fund. Why is it? Because it's very technical, it's very difficult, and you need to actually buy your equipment, spend the money yourselves before they give you the money. So you have to prove you've changed your gear. You have to prove you've changed your fishing practices to more sustainable ones. And then once you've showed them the bill, they will give you the money. But fishermen don't have treasury. They don't have cash. They can't front the expense. So what this revolving fund will do is it will act as a guarantee for banks who will lend the money to the fishermen, who will then be able to buy their equipment, change their gear. Once they've done that, they'll show the European Union they've done it. They will have proof they've done it, and therefore the European Union will give them the money back. They'll give it to the bank. The bank, the bank is happy, and the revolving fund acts as a guarantee in case the fishermen default. Okay, so that was the short version. But also what the fund does, it provides technical assistance to the fishermen because the paperwork is just awful. So they will get help from the fund. Because yeah, there's just no way. You can't tell people, well, you have to change your fishing gear. You have to help them do that. Okay. And so I'm going to end with this last example. So moving out from the fishing community inside or outside or around MPAs, there are a lot of other people living on the coast, on the islands, and they need to be involved as well. So one of Blue Seed's other projects to get communities involved was to develop what it has coined its Blue Business Incubator. And this is also in partnership with WWF and the ethical bank ZEF. Our pilot site was in the island of Lastovo in Croatia. And so the island of Lastovo is a remote island which has lots of tourists during the summertime, but otherwise very few people live there. And actually people are leaving the island because the economy is just not really well developed, let's say. And so people are searching for solutions to be involved in a sort of more sustainable economy. And they don't have much relationships with the nature park. So the idea of the project was to develop an incentive for people to change, to develop new businesses. So Blue Seeds with WWF made a call for interest for projects to be funded and supported. So there were community meetings, there were people, we went to meet people, to engage with them. And so we had a certain number of projects that were selected. And we supported these people in developing these new projects. So here's a list of the projects that were the winners. So there was a cooperative of fishermen, a shipbuilding business, bulk waste management business, bicycling for tourist business, fishing tourism, so a fisherman moving away from tourism to do pesca tourism, which will therefore reduce the pressure on the environment. Shifting wine production towards organic wine production, shifting olive oil production towards from conventional to organic olive oil production, and finally a slow food restaurant. So supporting people who don't have the know-how, who don't have the money to develop a business or to shift their business from a conventional approach to a more sustainable approach. It takes money, it takes support, it takes help. Okay, so you don't just give money to people, you tell them how to spend the money, you help them do it. Okay, and so yes, I'm sorry, Christophe, I'm finishing. Last slide. So building on the revolving fund, we are developing a new project to replicate the Blue Business Incubators to other sites. The incubator being a community, so Incubator 1, Lastovo in Croatia. And the idea is to have a capital that will be able to fund new projects, sustainable projects in communities around the coastline, around MPAs. And once they've spent their money, they've developed their project, they refund, the money goes back into the fund and someone else can benefit from it. So the revolving funds in these two examples, actually, they end up belonging to the community. They become the community's common project, because once you're done, you refund, the money's available for someone else. And so through these two projects, there were so many let's say, spillover benefits for the communities. A women cooperative started building the pots made of the grass, jonc cassé. Here, people started talking with the park on Lastovo, because the park and the mayor weren't really on speaking terms. So now they people engage together. They have a common project. They have a common vision now, through involving these communities and these fishermen. And so that actually changes a lot. Thank you very much for listening. Sorry, Christophe.
No, not fine. I think it was really interesting and really important to talk about that aspect, combining the engagement of stakeholders. When we talk about stakeholders, we talk about real people. This word, stakeholders, is not that nice because we're really talking about people, fishermen, and it's really something, I think, a nice transition also for the case study success story in Coral Guardian. We cannot go to see as a communities and tell them what they are doing is wrong, because most of the time they quite know that, but we have to provide solutions, and often it passes through money. So it was really interesting to see that we have to find financing approach. And so this finance can come from banks, from Europe, but also with the community entrepreneurship. And I think it's something that I find interesting here is that if I can ask you, I think that you are not only trying to finance marine conservation to finance the MPA, but also to change the practices on land that have impact on the sea. This is something interesting.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So yeah, sorry, maybe that wasn't clear. I mean, you have to try and engage with the communities that are living near these MPAs, because they, it's about social acceptability, right? So, I mean, we're going to talk about this later, but it's in getting everybody involved, and that's key to having the protected area accepted. But it's also thinking outside the box. Protected area is like a box, but so we do well inside, and we just don't care about what's outside. No, you have to try and you can lean on the MPA as a project. You can lean on it, but it's only something you're leaning on. You actually have to reach further. You have to reach out.
Thanks a lot, Timothy.
So now we're going to hear from Coral Guardian, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. So Coral Guardian initiated a conservation project in 2016 on Hataman Island to address reef destruction caused by dynamite fishing. The project involved locals in coral restoration and protection, and a monitoring program was established to measure its impact and build stakeholder confidence. So today we're going to be hearing from Coco Tamlin and Florine Jacob. So Coco is the director of Coral Guardian. Having studied socio-political ecology in London, she did her thesis on the socio-political context of poaching in militarized conservation programs in Kenya. Following numerous experiences contributing to social and environmental projects around the world, she then specialized in communication and outreach programs on the protection of coral ecosystems. And currently field and scientific project manager at Coral Guardian, Florina is an ecologist passionate about coral reefs conservation and science. After her undergraduate studies on ecology in Colombia, she worked on coral restoration projects in the Caribbean, on tourism impacts on coral reefs, as well as in science communication. She joined the Coral Guardian team 2 years ago when she was a Mares student. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, Christophe and Nikita, for the invitation, Université Côte d'Azur. We're delighted to be here and to tell you our story in Indonesia of a coral restoration project we developed and why we believe it's a success despite many difficulties we've encountered. And it would be interesting to hear whether you believe it's a success or not too. So to give you a bit of context, we work on Hataman Island, which is a tiny island about the size of this room. But to give you a bit of a larger context, Hataman Island is located in the Coral Triangle, which you can see on the dotted lines. The Coral Triangle only covers less than 2% of the world's ocean area, which sounds little, but actually it hosts 76% of tropical coral species. Over 200 million people live there, of which 95% live close to the coast. So just to give you an example of how important this area is in terms of marine biodiversity, but also how important marine biodiversity here is for people who live close to the coast. And as Timothée mentioned, so people depending on these ecosystems for a living in terms of either fishing or tourism or other economic needs. So we developed this project in collaboration with a local nonprofit called Waka Eling Sementon. And this area is sadly, actually, sorry, I'm not finished. Did I do that? Yeah, so Just to finish on the coral triangle, sadly, it's one of the most threatened areas in the world in regards to reef degradation, due to many human activities such as rising sea temperatures, pollution, poor land use management, but also due to destructive fishing practices. So like dynamite fishing, which you can see in the images on the right. I think there's, yeah, is it tactile?
Yeah.
Okay,
Title.
sorry. Okay, I'll be more careful. So you can see pictures on the right of Hatteman Island. So what it looked like once dynamite had been used for fishing, which was a technique that was used a lot in the 1930s. It's now forbidden, but sadly there's anecdotal evidence that it still persists in some areas. So when our team arrived and visited Hatteman Island in 2014, we also visited the village of Seraya Besar, which is a fishing community that depends solely on fishing. There's no tourism. And we began to collect testimonies from the fishermen. The village chief was very keen and immediately mentioned the problem of dynamite fishing and the fact there were also problems with anchors on the reef. And with the collection of different testimonies from villagers, they basically knew, as Christophe says, that there was a problem. I mean, when you use dynamite, you have to fish somewhere else the very next day. So the problem is clearly visible, but they didn't know what to do. So they suggested we develop a project together. So you can see the fishermen there on the left. So yeah, through discussions with and interviews with locals, we also realized that trust was very fragile. There'd been other projects that had tried to get launched in the area to develop marine protected areas, but that hadn't involved them, that had actually excluded them from the projects. So quite a lot of fishermen weren't actually keen, and especially when we mentioned the word protected, because that was the idea, was to protect an area and then develop coral restoration actions. There was real tension during meetings, and we weren't really sure whether we could even start. But actually, with validation from the local chief and from certain villagers, we began the project. Sorry, is that? Sorry. Yeah. No, that was a bit too soon. Has it gone back? Yes, it's gone back. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, confusing. So we began the project, and actually what was positive was with time, villagers who had been against the project to start with began seeing that they could actually benefit from the project. They could see how it was getting developed, how the team that was actually hired to develop the actions were developing skills and competence. And they were also, of course, interested in the paid aspect of activities, seeing that fishing can be quite dangerous and poorly paid. And just to give you an idea, because Florina will be going into more about this trust we developed with them, give you an idea of the interviews we had. Some fishermen, this 30-minute interview that we still have from this fisherman who explained that he used to fish, very easily fish 30 kilos a day. Fishing now, he was only fishing between 3 and 4 kilos if he was lucky. So there was a real awareness, and but we still, despite this, we still had to develop their trust, which is where I hand over the microphone to Florina.
Yes,
Thank you, Coco.
Just 1 second. Yes. Yes, so just following up, so this was really one of the priorities for the French team on the early stages of the project, to secure financing, to develop the conservation activities, but especially to secure the local team's salary. Because since the very start, there were 6 full-time employees on the local team. And so since they were, 4 of them were from the local village, so since they were like transforming their activities from full-time fisheries to also conservation, it was important for them to have a good, to be able to sustain their livelihoods through conservation as well. So that's why some mechanisms were put in place at that time, such as Adopt a Coral, that was a participative financing program that is actually still ongoing, but also in collaboration with enterprises that were interested in funding this project. So it was really important for the members of the local team to have a good relationship and a good perception of the project, because they were somehow the representatives of the project in the local village. So that's why it was also important to select the members carefully, so they would be respected and they would be trusted also by the rest of the village. And this was something that we realized, as Coco said, with ups and downs, that the presence and the cohesion of the local team is very important for the development of the project, especially for this kind of project that is developed in cooperation between the Indonesian and the French team. So when the French team was not on the field, it was important to be framed and to be clear what was the project about, what were the activities, how to measure the impact. And in all of these, the presence of a local manager that would motivate constructively the local team and that would have a good communication with them, with the local team, but also with the French team, was really pivotal for the development of the project, and we learned that the hard way. So yeah, once the local team was confirmed, the financing was secured, it was able to add a new layer of the project, which was the monitoring of the outcomes. It really started in the early stages of the project, and there was both social and biological monitoring at these stages, which was very, let's say, it could tackle both the decrease of fisheries that the fishermen could perceive, but it could also give some information about the return of biodiversity. So protocols were really adapted to the local context. The idea was that they would make sense to the team and they would understand what the data they were collecting, the results that they were analyzing. So we had on one side the monitoring of the local fisheries with a volunteer group of fishermen from the village of Soraya Besar that started in 2016. And in 2019, we could see an increase in the visitation around the marine protected area, as Benoit was saying just before. They see that they could catch more fish around the marine protected area compared to the start of the project. And also for the fish diversity, we also had an enormous return of biodiversity because there was a reconstruction of the habitat. So there were, in 2022, there were 30 times or up to more than 30 times more abundance of indicator species on the restored area compared to 2016. And so all these elements are, of course, are useful to see, okay, what are the outcomes of the project, but it's especially useful to reinforce the trust with the local team, with the local community, and also with the financial actors that accepted and trusted on the project to be developed. So, well, here we have just mentioned some of the aspects that are really, that we consider building blocks for this project to be a success, if we can say so, in terms of community involvement and biodiversity return. And we currently have a local team of 8 members that has been stable for almost 3 years now, that are very proud of being part of the project, that have developed new skills. Some of these photos were taken from our youngest members that have developed a really passion and a real talent for underwater photography, or our eldest member that is it's very well known in the local village. So it's been really pleasant to see how the local team has also find new interests along with the conservation of Hatamin Island. But we also want to point out that it hasn't, like, success, it's not a final point and is not just a result that is achieved and that's it. It's a very fragile equilibrium that we have to keep on working day by day to keep having a close conversation, an honest conversation with the local team. And it's really an ongoing process. We just hope that all these elements that we have discussed can be useful and like stimulate your imagination to adapt them in other contexts.
Thank you, Florina. So it's really interesting because you arrive on a place that was damaged. You reconstructed this trust with the people there, and you built on something. And as you said, this is really a bottom-up approach again, because it took time, and actually you honestly say it's fragile. So it takes time to construct something. But with the local people. So finally, how is this acceptability? Because then we will talk about acceptability. So I think you have 2 examples. You talk here about the Indonesian one. If I understand correctly, it has been created with the people there. So is it well accepted? How is it enforced by the people maybe themselves? And I think you're working in Spain too. But in Spain, the situation may be different because when you arrived, it was already an MPA?
Yes.
So maybe first question, how long did it take between when it has been collectively accepted by the people there and when it became an official MPA recognized by the country?
Great question, thank you. So I'd say it took about 4 or 5 years for it to really be accepted. We launched the project in 2015. Just with the local validation from the chief. And then with time, we got the validation from the local mayor, from the regional governor, and we officialized the marine protected area in 2019.
Okay.
And as Florina said, also with results, with the monitoring, that also takes time. So being able to show results to the village, to the teams, but then also for them to see the results when they go fishing. And yes, it's the team that implements, so the protection and the restoration area. So there are 8 team members. One of them has been there from the start. And yeah, they implement it. Fishermen come and visit them on the island. So they're not allowed to fish on the marine protected area, but there's a real friendship and acceptance of the project there.
But so if you can confirm, the MPA is recognized by the state as well now?
Yes, it's now recognized since 2019.
And maybe a few words about Spain. I don't know if you want to talk
Florina,
about
do you want to?
Yes, so the Spanish project is more recent. It was launched in 2020, and it was a very different situation because there was already a marine protected area that has been decided by the region in southern Spain, and it was just because of the biodiversity, like the biological value of the zone. But there was no enforcement at all on the marine protected area. It was just a name given to that zone. So our local partner, Coral Soul, the non-profit, they decided to act to counter back the degradation of the coral ecosystem there. But it was really collaborating with diving centers. So it was more, this project was a catalyzer for different actors on this area to be reunited towards the restoration and the conservation. So it's really on the other sense, and now they are trying to put pressure on the region to reinforce
It's something that has been decided top-down. It was not working, and now there is a kind of bottom-up approach to come back and make it to change.
Exactly.
Okay. Maybe just to be clear, you're talking about corals in the Med Sea, and I guess it's not exactly the same here. A few words about the corals?
Yes, it's completely different. So, well, in the Mediterranean project, we focus on one target species, that is Dendrophilia ramea, which is distributed normally around 70 meters deep. But in this specific area, we can find it between 30 and 40 meters deep. So we can access through diving, but it's very technical diving, rebreathers and technical diving. Whereas in Indonesia, it's apnea, basically, and it's adapted to the context.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you talk a lot about this social acceptability. So we will go on with the part 4.
So next, we're going to hear from Florent Favier, who is formerly a communications officer in a national park, and he will explore the application and his experience on land to marine conservation. He will also discuss engaging businesses in ecological transition and promoting awareness of the costs of inaction while accelerating the best adopted practices. With a master's degree in communication, Florent started working in 2000 as a communication officer on the return of wolves in France. He was then recruited by the Mercantaire National Park to develop its communication department. In 2016, he moved to the Oceanographic Institute in Monaco as a digital strategy officer. And then since 2021, he has been an independent consultant for various clients and their ecological projects.
Thank you very much, Nikita.
Yeah. Good.
We'll skip in French,
Yes.
I think.
So just once again, you have, it works in both ways. So if you have difficulties to understand French, we still have the little dinghies on the back for you.
Christophe avait besoin de quelqu'un qui soit moins bon en anglais pour justifier la traduction. Je m'y colle. Non, j'aurais pu assurer en anglais, mais je préférais être un peu précis en français. Merci pour l'introduction et pour l'invitation. Je suis content d'être ici. Généralement, j'étais plutôt au fond en train d'aider les organisateurs de la Monaco Ocean Week à l'Institut océanographique et j'ai écouté avec beaucoup d'attention l'ensemble des collègues parce que c'est vrai que ce qui m'intéressait d'apporter, c'était une vision plus terrestre de la conservation qui me semblait assez rarement être un transfert d'expérience entre un parc national sur Terre et un parc national ou une aire marine protégée en mer. Alors, j'ai pas préparé, je ne suis ni scientifique ni j'ai préparé de grandes présentations. Je comptais sur Christophe pour me poser des questions pertinentes.
D'accord, ok.
Et je sais qu'il en a plein, et bien sûr dans la salle aussi. Mon approche, alors déjà, comprehensive conservation, c'est intéressant parce qu'en français, comprehensive, ça veut dire qui est compréhensif.
C'est global, mais oui.
Understanding et comprehensive conservation, c'est conservation globale. Ouais. Mais c'est intéressant de se dire que le mot français compréhensif peut être pris au sens premier et se dire que pour que la conservation soit bonne, il faut qu'on comprenne bien ceux à qui elle s'adresse. Donc, moi qui suis communicant de formation, j'ai toujours tendance à dire qu'on a 2 yeux, 2 oreilles, une seule bouche, et donc il faut regarder doublement, écouter 2 fois plus que ce qu'on parle. Et en l'occurrence, quand on essaye de s'adresser à des communautés, bien que j'aime pas trop ce terme, à des communautés locales, c'est vrai que l'approche d'écoute et de compréhension de quels sont les problèmes, qu'est-ce qui est généré comme problème finalement par la conservation, c'est vraiment clé. Donc,
if you need questions, so yeah, you understand English?
I can.
Okay.
I can, yeah.
So maybe we can start with with the whole thing because the idea here, it's really interesting. We were talking about acceptability by people, and when we were talking with Florent about your past, told me, yeah, but really like when you try to develop ideas around the wolf with people raising sheep, you also have this issue. So maybe if you want to start with that.
Alors, c'est vrai que la compréhension du problème, elle est un peu trop complexe quand on arrive de l'extérieur et qu'on dit voilà quel est le problème et voilà comment il faut le régler. Et vu de Paris, en l'occurrence, puisque le retour du loup était géré par les ministères de l'Agriculture et de l'Écologie, vu de Paris, les bergers n'ont qu'à mettre des chiens de protection, n'ont qu'à mettre des bergers supplémentaires, n'ont qu'à mettre des clôtures de nuit. Et c'est vraiment faire abstraction de la complexité du métier. Si on n'est pas allé sur place, si on n'a pas rencontré les gens, si on n'a pas écouté quels étaient les problèmes posés, on n'arrivera pas à apporter des solutions adéquates. Donc, c'est vrai que l'écoute, c'est une des premières, vraiment une des premières solutions quand on parle de conservation, même si ça suffit pas toujours, parce qu'en l'occurrence, certains pensent que l'incompatibilité entre certaines espèces comme le loup et ce métier-là est vraiment trop fondamentale pour être résolue.
Maybe just a few words in English for those who are following online, because they don't have the translation at the same time. That so here you were talking about the fact that the return of the wolf in France was piloted by people from Paris, the capital, and so we come back to this idea of top-down pressure, say, and that here you need to listen. You were talking about listening a lot. You need listening to get the information and bring it up back. And it connects to what we were talking also with Benoit, a lot, like going to fishermen and collecting this information.
Just to mean that the problem of the wolves was very, very conflictual between those who are against wolves, those who are pro-wolves. And it was a very, very strong struggle between two parties in France. And it's hard to have the median line to be at the good level of communication with all the different
Find a good trade-off.
stakeholders. Yes.
You're kind of challenging the translator, turning to French and English, but we have professional translators, so thank you. So this is about the wolf. How long did you work with the wolf project?
5 years long. Pendant 5 ans, pardon.
Pendant 5 ans, ok.
Donc ça a duré 5 ans. Ce que
So how did it change? Like, finally, did you see a change, like the capital, Paris, going to listen to stakeholders? We are recorded.
Le fait est que le temps a joué aussi en la faveur de certaines mesures de protection. Les choses se sont relativement apaisées parce qu'en effet, certains messages ont été entendus. Il s'agissait là aussi d'un programme européen à l'époque, et c'est vrai que la complexité des programmes européens n'a pas forcément facilité l'acceptation rapide des mesures de protection, mais petit à petit, ça s'est amélioré. Et il y a un point qui va faire le lien avec la suite de mon parcours quand je suis passé au Parc national du Mercantour. Donc là, je montre juste quelques images pour illustrer la difficulté du problème. Là, on est dans un refuge, dans une maison du Parc national du Mercantour qui avait été vandalisée. Là, c'est un message assez clair. À l'époque, juste avant la création du Parc national du Mercantour, il y avait, ça s'appelait la réserve de chasse, la réserve nationale de chasse du Mercantour. Et en fait, les réactions sont un peu, les racines des réactions sont un petit peu les mêmes. L'opposition vient du fait que quelqu'un d'extérieur vient nous dire comment il faut qu'on fasse et pourquoi il faut qu'on protège éventuellement quelque chose qu'on avait déjà l'impression de protéger par des réactions, par des aspects culturels de notre façon de faire. Et donc là, juste avant la création du parc, il y avait une opposition extrêmement violente à cette mise en œuvre. C'est un des tout premiers projets de parc national en France et un des tout derniers qui a été fait avant la nouvelle vague des parcs nationaux après 2006.
I have a really, really weak memory, so I have to translate step by step. So we're here talking about the creation of the Mercantour National Park that created a lot of protests, you could say. Opposition, yes, better. Protest is now in France, yes, opposition. And because it was someone else from the external, from the outside environment that decided for people.
Yes, oui. Dans la conservation, il y a un élément qui est important, et donc je disais, les mots sont vraiment importants. On parle de local communities, des communautés locales. Dès qu'on parle de ça, on s'exclut finalement de la communauté, on s'exclut du territoire, et donc ça veut dire que la part de parole donnée, et ça a été bien dit par les expériences qui ont été montrées là, on doit donner la place et la parole aux personnes qui habitent et qui vivent dans les territoires. C'est vraiment fondamental. Ce qui n'est pas vraiment le cas dans un parc national. On a des scientifiques qui arrivent, on a une régulation qui vient du pouvoir central et qui dit ici, le territoire est tellement vaste, tellement riche qu'il faut le protéger. C'est vrai parfois, on ne peut pas toujours faire en écoutant. Et là, en l'occurrence, c'était une décision, on va dire, légale de l'État de protéger ce territoire. Et donc, en fait, derrière, le Parc national du Mercantour, qui s'est créé en 1979, a mis des années et des années à rattraper le problème et à essayer d'intégrer davantage les habitants, les élus, les locaux à la conservation du territoire. Et c'est encore pas totalement gagné partout. En 2006, il y a une nouvelle loi qui a fait que les locaux étaient davantage considérés, on va dire, le développement local était davantage considéré.
So it started, the park opened in 1979.
Yeah.
It was really long for the park to be accepted, and still now it's still a problem. And you were mentioning 2006.
A new law.
A new law, a regional law, or
a national law about national parks.
To better integrate, consider the development of the different parties here, like economic development.
Economic development was.
Okay.
En fait, la notion de fierté, alors on a parlé d'argent qui était indispensable pour le développement local. C'est pas faux, et c'est vrai que l'argent est toujours important, est toujours utile. Mais au-delà de ça, il y a quand même d'autres registres sur lesquels on peut, me semble-t-il, jouer. Et il y en a un, c'est la fierté. J'en parlerai aussi avec les acteurs économiques tout à l'heure. La fierté d'appartenir à un territoire, c'est un sentiment qu'on a tous, en fait. Quand on vit quelque part, on est fier de vivre là où on vit. On a un attachement à ce territoire. Et il est vrai que la logique de la fierté me semble être quelque chose d'important. Pardon, je continue à montrer des photos, mais c'était juste de l'illustration à la création du parc avec des coups de chevrotine dans les panneaux du parc. Mais petit à petit, le fait d'intégrer cette notion de fierté, de vivre dans un territoire finalement reconnu nationalement et internationalement, a fait son effet. Une des premières attentes du directeur du parc quand il m'a recruté, c'était de dire ce parc est reconnu de l'extérieur, j'aimerais qu'il le soit plus de l'intérieur, et en fait, moins on pourra le contester parce que tout le monde le trouvera beau et riche, plus localement, les gens auront on va dire de bonnes raisons de moins être contre l'institution elle-même et de valoriser davantage le territoire.
So one of the axes to make it acceptable is to work on the sense of belonging.
And pride, yes.
And
Pride of being there.
Pride of being there. And so that the park can be, it was at some point better accepted from the outside than from inside. And so, yeah, they worked on that to make it acceptable. We have someone not happy behind us.
Yeah, just a blink to the, pardon, un petit clin d'œil à cet homme qui est Roger Settimo, qui a été un des personnages clés de la création du parc national. C'était un bottier de Monaco. Il fabriquait il y a un cordonnier. Et il a vraiment fait beaucoup pour le parc, pour faire en sorte que ça se crée, quitte à ce que ça se crée dans un gros, une ambiance de conflit assez forte. Mais voilà. Et le prince Régnier III, le père du prince souverain, a été aussi un élément déterminant pour la création du parc national, d'où les relations très proches que le parc national continue d'entretenir avec la principauté. Il y a un autre élément, donc on va passer peut-être plus sur la partie économique, et je reviens sur la fierté. Je participe à une association à Nice qui s'appelle le Passeport Transition 06, qui essaye d'engager les chefs d'entreprise dans la transition écologique. Un des premiers arguments qui fait que ça les intéresse, c'est la protection de leur territoire, c'est de là où ils habitent, de là où ils ont leur vie, où ils ont leur entreprise. La conservation de son propre territoire et alors, ça peut nous paraître étonnant, mais finalement, ça n'est pas tant que ça. Parce que quand on regarde toutes les expériences dont vous avez parlé, finalement, ce sentiment d'appartenance, il est puissant et il nous aide à convaincre que quand on sait ce qui menace notre territoire, on s'associe aux efforts de protection.
Okay, so we are going to use that idea of sense of belonging to the economic sector now. Do you want to go ahead? Yeah, because I think there is a slide that I think is interesting here. I remember one of your slides.
Yes, le triangle de l'inaction, je l'avais mis en anglais, mais alors ça vient d'une autre expérience qui est la Convention des entreprises pour le climat, une association française qui s'est inspirée de ce qu'a fait l'État il y a quelques années avec la Convention citoyenne pour le climat, où 150 citoyens avaient été tirés au sort et on leur avait finalement donné un certain nombre d'informations à propos des différentes menaces environnementales, qu'elles soient climatologiques, qu'elles soient de la biodiversité, etc. Et on leur a demandé de réfléchir à des mesures. Et ces 150 citoyens tirés au sort, donc qui n'avaient aucune connaissance préalable, ont proposé des mesures extrêmement radicales.
So we are talking about a French
Initiative
yes, from
the government.
To associate people in decisions regarding climate. So,
150.
150 citizens in France have been randomly picked to try to find solutions.
And they had a lot of very radical propositions to make to the government, who didn't. Okay. Pourquoi on parle de ça? C'est que cette initiative a inspiré les créateurs d'une association qui s'est appelée la Convention des entreprises pour le climat, qui a pris 150 entreprises françaises, chefs d'entreprises français, de diverses tailles. On avait de petites entreprises jusqu'à de très grands groupes internationaux. Et en fait, leur objectif, c'est de dire on va venir challenger ce triangle de l'inaction qui veut que quand on est citoyen, on dit bah, c'est aux entreprises de changer leur mode de production et c'est au gouvernement de légiférer. Quand on est gouvernement, on dit bah, tant que les citoyens ne votent pas pour des lois plus radicales, on ne va pas les mettre en œuvre. Et puis, tant que les entreprises ne demandent pas des lois plus contraignantes pour elles, bah, on ne va pas les faire. Et les entreprises qui disent bah, c'est le client qui décide, tant qu'il achète mes produits suremballés, je ne vais pas les changer, etc., etc. Et tant que le législateur ne légifère pas, je ne change rien. Ça, c'est le triangle de l'inaction. L'idée, c'est de dire, les citoyens, on a bien vu avec la Convention citoyenne pour le climat, qu'ils avaient plein d'idées, mais que finalement, elles n'ont pas été mises en œuvre par le gouvernement. Le gouvernement, c'est un peu compliqué à changer parce qu'il y a des temporalités qui sont assez courtes. On va dire ça rapidement. Donc, allons nous adresser au monde économique, parce que qu'est-ce qu'un chef d'entreprise? C'est quelqu'un qui va en permanence être confronté à la réalité, au contexte, qui va devoir s'adapter.
So, as a triangle of inaction, the idea is that everybody is escaping their responsibilities, from government saying that it's to individuals to elect another one, and so on. So here the idea was that to find a solution to break this triangle.
Et donc, le chef d'entreprise est le bon niveau d'après les instigateurs de cette convention. Et il s'avère que les 150 chefs d'entreprise, c'est vraiment on demandait au top management. Les top managers ont eu 6 sessions de 2h30 où pour la première, on leur a donné la claque climatique. C'est comme ça qu'ils l'appellent. C'est pas très joli, c'est pas très positif, mais en fait, on leur montre où on en est avec le climat, la biodiversité, les limites planétaires, les ressources naturelles. Ils sortent de là lessivés, les larmes aux yeux pour la plupart, en se disant mais on savait pas, on n'avait pas compris. Et les sessions suivantes, c'est pour leur donner de nouveaux horizons. Et ils ont une dizaine de mois et 6 sessions de 2 jours et demi pour créer une feuille de route pour modifier leur business model.
So Florent is talking about how to engage economic stakeholders, so companies, CEOs of companies. So first, that they realize that we're talking about climate here mostly, so that we realize that there is a problem. So that's the first thing. But not only just to scare them, but to help them to create a roadmap for them to change their strategy.
Oui. Okay. Et leur business model. Et quand ils se sont rendus compte qu'il y avait un problème et qu'ils sciaient finalement tous la branche sur laquelle ils sont assis, en fait, on s'est rendu compte de là, c'était du vrai empowerment. C'est-à-dire qu'en fait, ils ont radicalement changé leur perception et essayé de faire changer toutes leurs parties prenantes, puisqu'en fait, ils ne peuvent rien faire sans leurs salariés, ils ne peuvent rien faire sans leurs prestataires, ils ne peuvent rien faire sans leurs clients. Et donc, il y a un vrai... finalement, le bon niveau, c'est probablement les entreprises pour casser ce triangle d'inaction, avec toujours le risque que beaucoup ont du greenwashing.
Yeah.
Mais juste pour finir là-dessus, le greenwashing, en fait, c'est pas que j'y crois pas, il y a vraiment beaucoup de gens qui font du greenwashing intentionnellement, mais il y en a beaucoup, c'est rarement intentionnel. Et c'est par ignorance. Et en fait, quand on sait, on fait plus de greenwashing, en fait, on met en œuvre. Et voilà, je pense qu'il y a une vraie inspiration à avoir. Quand quelqu'un sait, quel que soit son niveau de départ, quand il a la bonne information, il ne peut pas faire autrement que prendre les bonnes décisions.
Yeah. So here the idea is really on this initiative to break this triangle looking at cooperation. So for them to know, to break the problem of misinformation that they could have. And that's, you talk about greenwashing and say that greenwashing could be created by misinformation. So it can be on purpose, or it can be because they need more information. So yeah, so that they can change their business model and also communication strategy sometimes.
Yes.
Thank you, Florent.
My pleasure.
So, you have more slides, but I think I have to. Yes, that some initiatives also part of the strategy, and a lot of waste collected before they reach the ocean.
Sure.
So we are going to the last part. We are going to talk about interdisciplinarity in education. So we've seen that collaboration between scientific and socio-economic stakeholders is crucial to find solutions, but it's not that natural. I was really lucky to be in a roundtable on blue economy with Mary and the CSM these last days, and it's something that we developed really. The idea is that how to get a common language between science and socio-economical stakeholders. One of the things is that first they don't have the same background. They don't start talking together. You have mostly scientists on one side and socio-economic stakeholders on the other. So that's why we wanted to talk a little bit about that idea to make our programs more interdisciplinary so that we learn, that students learn to talk together from university. So I will first give the floor to Nikita Rose. So Nikita, after completing your bachelor's degree in environmental science in New York, you joined MARES to become involved in ocean protection. But in parallel, you have a rich experience, and I think it's what you're going to talk here. You developed an international experience in the rehabilitation of mammals, birds, reptiles, and you work as a botanist to propagate native flora. And so you believe, you can tell me the opposite if I'm wrong, that society, history, economics, politics play an important role in the preservation of nature and especially of the ocean. So first, Nikita.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Christophe. So I'm Nikita Rose, as he said, and I am a current MARES student at the Université Côte, where I study marine biology integrated with interdisciplinarity. And so when I first entered the biology field, I had no comprehension of intersectionality. I had never been introduced to or taught about the concept. And when I look back at myself, I can see that I was living in a bubble. I was imagining conservation of our planet as a one-way street, and I was completely wrong. I have now come to realize that intersectionality plays a prominent role in any type of science field. Prior to my start at MARES, I worked in a few different types of terrestrial biology sectors, and I'd like to share a personal experience that largely impacted how I view intersectionality today. So, I used to work as a botanist on the Greater Chihuahuan Desert, which is located on the border between Texas, USA and Mexico. The company I was working for had me propagating native plants and building and maintaining a community garden that was integrated with indigenous flora. Do you know how hot Texas is? It is really hot. And do you know how hard it is to keep plants alive in 40+ degree weather and 0% humidity? Once again, it is really difficult to do, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't go to this small community and start pretending like I knew what I was doing. I didn't go there and start propagating and planting things, expecting to succeed as some sort of novel biologist. Instead, I went to this area and I began to listen to the community. I listened to the people and their story about ecological heritage and traditional knowledge. I listened to their concerns about where I was planting and what, and I listened to their tips on how to keep plants alive in the desert. And this worked. And so as the garden began to grow, so did my relationship with the community. And there was this really magical time where community members were coming to find me to bring me seeds, native seeds that they had found on their own or had been passed down from friends or family so that I could plant them in the garden. And my initial job was to come to this area to preserve the native flora of this desert, but I wasn't doing it alone anymore. The community was now planting a piece of themselves in this garden and therefore a piece of themselves in this project. And when I was able to, I began giving seeds and plants right back to the community. And we became a circulating system, sharing advices and seeds, and cultivating a new generation of indigenous plants in a united environment that was based on mutual acknowledgement, acceptance, and respect. We are working together to honor the indigenous roots that have played a role in the grand history of this ecosystem and this community, a history that has been there long before I ever arrived. I would have never succeeded on my own, and that is why there is power in intersectionality. When we discuss protecting ecosystems and protecting our planet and protecting our oceans, we often miss the multidisciplinary threads that are woven into the environmental crises that we see today. There exists a direct nexus between these environmental crises and our modern-day socio-economic problems. And these intersections span social, economic, political, cultural, and gender-based segues. Every person, every population, every community is different. If we want to protect our ecosystems, we have to protect the people that rely on those ecosystems. We have to be able to acknowledge their identities and their hardships, be able to truly see them and listen to them, and be able to take the time to see their home through their eyes, because that's exactly what it is, their home. Success can only be brought on by the unity and acknowledgement of these intersections. Black climate activist Leah Thomas defines intersectional environmentalism as an inclusive version of environmentalism that advocates for both the protection of people and the planet. There exists a large overlap between people and the planet, and you cannot acknowledge one without acknowledging the other, because they exist as a piece of one another. As a student, I am proud to come from a generation and a time that is beginning to acknowledge these intersections. I'm proud to come from a university that teaches intersectionality, and I'm proud to be able to talk about it. But change cannot start with just me, and acknowledgement of this topic cannot start with just me. It starts with you as well, which is why I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for coming out today and for being a part of the discussion of the intersection between protecting ecosystems and empowering populations. And with that, I'd like to pass the mic off to Christophe Maquette.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. I think I can say I'm proud too, but I will tell you more privately, but thank you. Je peux me passer something that we didn't think about, the remote. So what to add to that, actually, I don't know, I would like just to think, to come back on a guy that's actually this guy, Balding, is in one of the first slides of all of my classes, combining science, protection and sustainable development. The idea is that economists and scientists work together, and we are here in the 60s, 70s in the US, in the middle of a lot of agitation. Also, somehow like a bottom-up effect, with people taking the voice against the military intervention of US in Vietnam, and at the same time, there's a lot of development in the US, federal developments, development industries, for example, that were having an impact on human health at the same time. So in the 70s, there is a lot of developments in the US with new laws to protect the nature, including environmental impact assessment, for example. And here we have Balding. Kenneth Balding is an economist, actually, and he's the one saying that economy cannot just work on its own. So for him, he's talking about economy, so you know the left part of this diagram, so where economy uses a resource, let's say input, and generates value, output. He calls that the throughput economy. But this is not true, because when you create value, you actually create waste, and this waste impacts the ecosystem. Economists could say, we don't really care. But actually, this ecosystem, this environment corresponds to a lot of resources you use to create your value. And it's an economist saying that in the US in the 60s, 70s. So sustainable development is not new, but maybe we need to come back on this idea that economists and also, well, natural lovers can work together. It changed a lot. Sustainable development takes a new turn now with the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, les Objectifs de Développement Durable de l'ONU. And so here's the idea is that you have all the problems, but also all the opportunities to solve this problem in the world. The idea is that you cannot tackle SDG 14, l'objectif 14, so the blue one, without trying to solve others. So we often look at that graph to talk about SDGs, but I actually prefer that one, where here we can see that these different SDGs, they are connected together. So to actually protect the ecosystem on land, in the water, climate, and so on. It's exactly what we've seen from the beginning. You cannot go at Atamina and tell the fishermen that their explosive fishing is not working, unless you can provide them with tools so that with society changes. And for these society changes, you need also tools for economy. So you have to tackle SDGs related to equalities, poverty, food safety, in order to make sure that at the end, you can solve problems in nature. Voilà, so we are running a little bit out of time, but just we have solutions here locally. If you're from from the place here, you know that if you put your head in the water, you will find Posidonia oceanica, a seagrass. This is not an algae. Well, and because it's not an algae, but a seagrass, they have roots. You can see the thickness of the roots. This is also a nice way to sequestrate carbon. I'm not entering into a controversial discussion, and we can have this discussion after with our drink, but it's also part of what we call ecosystem services. Natalie Hilmi is here. If you want, you can ask her. She will be better than me to answer that. But we use Posidonia oceanica for centuries. In the 16th century, we were using Posidonia oceanica, the leaves, to cover the roof. This is really weird for a French person, comme des toits en paille, something like thatched, but I don't know how to say it in English. Well, we use that for a long time. But when you use Posidonia to put this on your roof, it's actually what we can call provisioning services. This is an idea of dollars per hectare that you can generate for the society with this Posidonia protected somewhere. What we see now is that these ecosystem services are not only about what they provide you now, but about the fact that they can help us to regulate the planet. They sequestrate carbon. They absorb the energy from the waves. It limits erosion. And this is something that can be much more valuable. In the room, once again, you have other people who can talk about blue carbon. I can see our former students, also Fernando works extensively on that. So we can see here that you have a lot of potential. And this is what I will call a capital. And here, coming back to Etemin, at some point you say they protect the ecosystem, so it restores the fisheries services. So the idea is really to understand that we have a capital. But for that, once again, we need to work with economists. For the cultural services, this is something which is much more difficult to address because it depends on who is looking at that. It depends if you want to go in the water or not. But this is something, this is also controversial, more complex to address. But it's important not to forget the value that ecosystem can provide in terms of cultural services. You're happy, like hedonism. So yeah, just a little clin d'oeil to some of our former students also, just to finish on that idea of combining strengths and discours, like backgrounds, we'll say. Frédéric and Lionel are two former students from Mares, and they decided to create a startup to actually better protect the Posidonia bottoms. So they are in the process of working with economists, with scientists, to find a way to finance the protection of Posidonia areas in order to, to restore the capital. And as you said before, we need finance for that. So they're here thinking about blue carbon. Part of the idea is blue carbon. I just wanted to talk about blue leaf conservation. They're a startup, petite publicité quand même au passage des anciens étudiants. Because to do that, they need different skills together. They need science, and there is a lot of things we don't know. We still don't really know how much carbon can be sequestrated and for how long. We need science to work on that. Also, you need actors directly in the field to put that in action. We need mostly non-profits that can go there. I can see a representative of Nature Dive here that can also participate into that. And in innovation, we need also incentives. You talked about reboots. You talked a lot about that before, that we need to provide incentives to stakeholders. And I think here, in your triangle of inaction, we have to address the government and the one deciding on the laws, because green finance, carbon markets can be institutionalized incentives that can make of spheres that we really need them to work together. I work in a business school, but I have a PhD in marine biology. So sometimes I'm on the nice side and with bad people. So for a lot of people, we have the nice side, science, conservation, and research. We don't like the other one, like it's the dark side. And there, you have people, they have ideas. They know that we have a problem and they want to find solutions as well. But they have an objective as well. They have a lot of objectives, which are to create value, to maintain jobs. So some often they say, okay, the one from the side, like your pictures with nom aux écologistes, it's not really people having the same software logiciel. So I think we have to better put them together. Really, once again, what you're doing, Nathalie, at CSM is something that can help a lot. But I think we need to bottom up again and create this connection with education. So as I like to say, I'm not sure I'm the good person to tell you that. I don't know if you have to trust me, because I'm actually the director of the program that does that at Université Côte d'Azur. So science, conservation, and innovation of marine resources. Yes, you can flash the QR code if you want, or you have a brochure à l'entrée. Voilà. So I want to finish on that and to open now the floor to questions. Maybe we can start with students. I think if two students could take a microphone, and as you're here and you take the microphone, you have one with you? I will let just the students ask a first question because they help us really a lot, as you know also with you. Il y en a un autre là, is this. And then we already have questions waiting. Also, we can take questions from the online audience if they type their questions on YouTube. Do we have already?
Good morning, everyone. Maybe this is something that...
Maybe if you can start first just to say who you are. So, hello, Luz.
Hello, I'm Luz, and I'm a first-year Maris student from Christoph Masters, and I'm currently doing my internship with Natalie.
The new name of the master.
In the Centre Scientifique de Monaco. And maybe as you're people that have been working for a long time in the environmental field, I would like to know what's your maybe the motivation that you have for us young scientists, because a lot of what we see in our classes nowadays, and I think I asked you this in the Blue Economy Roundtable, usually a lot of the statistics are not positive, and sometimes can even be a little depressing into me being a young scientist and how am I gonna tackle all these challenges. But we're still trying to be positive and thinking that these things have a solution. So maybe what would be your motivation for us young scientists to continue to embrace these challenges?
Maybe you... Maybe we can take a second question. We will come back. We're going to take 3 questions and come back. Is this maybe?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Isis. I'm also a MAHE student. I'm currently an intern for Lia Hopste and IFR in science communications. And my question would be, since we have a few of my colleagues here that I know that also are involved in the marine environment and field, what is you guys' perspectives on how we could expand and how we can help for the future the marine world to be more respected and more valued for all the resources and importance that they provide us?
Okay, first question for, okay, can we save the world? And here, how we do make maybe these initiatives which are local, maybe more global. At the same time, also, do we have already a question online? Yeah. Maybe you can share a question online and we can think about answers. So it's cultivating algae in marine protected areas, a way to increase the spillover effect, which will be also uptake CO2 and create work for fishermen. That's maybe a question for you. So, okay, so we can start with the question about, are we still able to live in that world in the future?
I think you have to train yourself about psychology, because human is always a problem, but human is always also the solution.
That's nice.
So thanks for that question. And the thing is that when you integrate measuring the outputs of the interventions that you do on ecosystems or that you don't do, that way you can better address what would be your next step. So just to have the example on Hatamine, we have tried several ways of doing coral outplanting. It has really been through the scientific optic that we have been able to quantify what are the good ones, what is the bad one, and how to adapt. So it's really thinking on what's the next step to give after the results that you're occurring, but you cannot decide where to go if you don't have data on the actions that you have taken, if that answers your question.
Thank
I don't know
you.
if someone wants to follow up on that, or we go to, we go to how we make local initiatives maybe more widespread. I don't know if it might be you actually at Blue Seeds, that you're also you, because you have the blue centers also to replicate your success.
So the question is about scaling up, as it's called, about replication. So that is actually one of the central questions. You have an idea, you have a proof of concept, you know your project can give results, it can deliver. You have a pilot site, and then you think, okay, we're going to scale up because it's good to, let's say, protect an area or empower some community with this idea. Let's do this at the Mediterranean level. It's things we think about every day at Blue Seeds, and the answer to that is that it's very difficult, actually. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. So I don't have the answer to that. What's sure is that it will take manpower. So I'd like to go back to the Lastovo example we were talking about earlier. The time it takes, the manpower it takes. You were mentioning the acceptability, how you need to get involved. You can't just come from the outside and say, do that. Blue Seeds on the island of Lastovo was just one of the architects of that project. There was actually someone from WWF Adria who was there all the time talking to
partnerships between
people.
Non-profits. It's not only Blue Seeds working alone.
Yeah, with WWF, the project was a partnership. So this person was doing all that stakeholder engagement, all that engagement with the local communities. And so we had problems with COVID. Nobody was able to access the island for a while. So the project declined. Then you go back. But the point is you need to engage with people, and that takes time. You can't just, and I think when we're talking about the wolf issue, you can't just accelerate things, put them in the fast track. You were saying, le temps doit jouer. Time must have its own way. You can't just...
it's like the French saying that you can go tout seul, c'est bien, mais ensemble, ça prend plus de temps, mais on va plus loin. Together, it's slower, but we can go.
Perhaps. So perhaps there's something there. I was quite very impressed actually about how fast your project. You said it took 5 years for the MPA to be accepted, and then it became nationally designated MPA in the country's law at one point.
Yes, so I don't know I've forgotten the actual Indonesian term. I'd have to check exactly, but it's recognized. Yeah.
And so actually that time frame is actually super fast in marine conservation. MPAs or social acceptability even will take 5, 10, 15, 20 years before the marine protected area is actually registered, committed and implemented. Yeah. So it's a lot of people time going out there. And so I think there's hope there, because once you acknowledge that you have to talk to people in the field, you have part of the recipe, part of the solutions there. So, let's all be humble about how quick we want this to happen.
Maybe a last word with Florent, and we can go on the science part, and maybe I think you wanted also to address the question from Lou online. Maybe if you want also to comment scientifically on it.
I just wanted to cross two questions, because I think when you're young, you want to go fast, but whatever you do today, there will be impact, and there will be positive impact. Don't keep faith and trust future, and whatever you do will have impact and positive impact.
But we can also youth saying that the impact must go really quick, because we have a wall coming. So that's an interesting trade-off.
And can I just add also, at Coral Guardian, just to talk about the togetherness and working with time. Our aim is to develop a global network of coral guardians. So the idea is to focus on local initiatives. So when you were saying, how can we go from local to global? I think it's important to stay local and to take into account all the local context, all the different stakeholders, to make it participatory, but then to maybe have a global effect in the sense of developing many local initiatives.
So the only way to scale up is actually to adapt solutions to every context.
Exactly.
Maybe Benoit, I don't know if you want to address the science part or Florent.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I'll try and be quick. Sorry, Christophe. I'll try and be quick. So this is a technical question. So I'm not going to give it a purely technical answer, but the answer, Lou from Senegal. Hello, Senegal. Wow, Senegal. The answer is no. A little bit, yes, but really no, because seaweed. Oh,
yes, we can ask
the question. Oh, I can see it on the monitor.
We have a different monitor. Sorry. Could cultivating algae in marine protected area, so cultivating algae in marine protected area, be a way to increase the spillover effects? And there is a question also about the uptake of CO2 and work for fishermen.
There is a trend today to want to do seaweed farming, and there's a lot of money going in there, and there's a lot of pressure on, for example, institutions like the European Union to subsidize and support initiatives in this area. And so this is based on the idea that it actually has a low carbon print. Actually, some people say actually sequestrates carbon, which is not true. We don't know that, actually. And it's also based on the idea that it will sort of heal the environment, because there are too much nitrates, too many fertilizers going in the ocean, so it will grow on that. It will provide a resource that you can sell, but so far you're producing a resource that is being fed to cattle. Cattle are part of the problem, or that goes into cosmetics. Why not? But that's not really a sustainable solution. Okay, so seaweed farming will produce some income, but putting it in a marine protected area is not part of the solution. It might actually become part of the problem. And I won't go into the technical details. There's a lot of blue washing around this. Be very careful when an innovation, a new solution becomes trendy. You have to look it up, see if it's actually a real solution or a fake solution. In some instances, seaweed farming is a solution, but it might probably not be one in most other instances. So be careful.
There's maybe different scales here, like scale for fishermen to get an income that can help for the protection of their area. This is one thing. Maybe you're also considering the option of scaling up and seeing that as a bioengineering, engineering aspect to absorb carbon on the large scale, and this is different. I guess everybody can have different opinion on that. Do you want to follow up on this one or no? So maybe I think, Lucy, we have a next question here, and so if you have also questions, you can wave, and Isis will come to you.
Si je vais parler en français, ça va être plus confortable. Oui. Donc j'ai deux questions. Une d'abord pour vous, j'ai oublié votre prénom, pardon. Lorsque vous avez expliqué le triangle de l'inaction, que j'ai trouvé très intéressant, en fait, je voulais vous demander si les boards de ces compagnies avec lesquelles vous avez travaillé étaient d'accord pour opérer les changements, parce qu'on peut avoir des CEO qui soient très impactés, etc. Mais au final, si ceux qui détiennent les capitaux, donc sont les propriétaires finaux de ces compagnies, ne sont pas sensibilisés. Donc en fait, c'était la question. C'est de savoir finalement si vous êtes arrivé à aller vraiment au dernier stage des prises de décision. And I have another question for Nikita. So it's a very beautiful experience that you talk about. And I came from Chile, and in Chile, in the north of Chile, we have some experience like that, in the sense that native people have a lot of experience of how do they have to do to have their plant and so on. But beside that, they really have, unfortunately, some bad traditions in agriculture, in the use of water, for example. So I was wondering if you see something like that in Texas or not. Thank you.
You can answer in French or in English, as usual.
That's a good question, because when you have a CEO of a big group, international group, he can be convinced, but the shareholders and the group can pass through his opinion. So it's been complicated for some of them. Some of them quit their job. The CEO of a big group called Caterpillar, you may know by this name, he decided to quit the group because he knew he had no way to convince the deciders of the group. So he quit the group and he became a bénévole for the association, the Convention des entreprises pour le climat, because he was really convinced. But for all the others, CEO, it was obvious to take action and to take good decisions for their company, because they knew they didn't become how would I say ecologists, radical ecologists, but activists, but they decided to take action for their company, for their own sake.
Because they were seeing an interest for the company, or because I like to say that is it a goal for companies to save the world? They have to save jobs, but maybe we can. This can. I mean. Yeah, but my question was if they took actions because he was convinced and the CEO say, okay, we have to work on that for the world, or is it because they saw an interest in the company business, in the business model?
I think what's really interesting is usually they see both. They see that by saving their company, they're trying to also save the world. They usually have children, and this was really important for them to understand what's going on, which have threats for a human being, but also for their company. And trying to solve one, they solve both. So it was interesting.
Okay, we will also go to the answer of Nikita.
Yeah.
Maybe you can share a question also online. We will take maybe a last couple of questions after that, wrap up. We have also a surprise from one person of our team, and then we will have a drink outside with to allow all of us to talk together.
Okay, thank you for your question. So the area that I worked in is a very arid place. So there's not a lot of water in general to begin with. Actually, there you have the Rio Grande, which separates the United States and Mexico. And for a lot of people, that's represents a separation. It represents an arbitrary line between the two. But when you go there and you speak to the community, it represents something different. It represents a form of connection, a form of celebration between the two sides. So with that in mind, water, especially from the Rio, is seen as something that should be protected. And so I was actually coming there and learning a lot about minimizing my water use. And a lot of the plants that they had cultivated in the area, specifically vegetables and fruits, had been cultivated in a way to where they were able to withstand longer periods without needing water. And so I was actually the one being taught these techniques. And in the end, I was able to use that and create a system that was able to produce less water. Thank you.
We just changed the question. The first one was how to engage. The first one from Ma was how to engage. Thank you. How to engage more businesses in marine conservation, and what about the incentives? So what about the entry points? Maybe I don't know if Blue Seeds and Florent can answer that. We can take also next one from Ilaria. Question for EcoSeas. Directly for EcoSeas, the monitoring of the individual no-take zone gives the effectiveness of one zone. Have you tried to look at overall effectiveness of the 8 no-take zone network? You have the answer. So we can start. Can you come back on the first question? So the first question, just for the audience, for you to know, it's about how to better engage businesses.
So the question is, according to your experience, how can we include more businesses in marine conservation projects? What are the incentives to attract them for investment? The important word here, I understand, is investment. And so this is not an easy question because when you hear that word investment, it means the person who wants to give money wants a return on investment. And there lies the problem in that sentence, where there's another important word, is conservation. So there's this trend that there is a blue market or a green market, and that this market will be able to provide a return on investment. It is the new frontier for investors. A lot of that is not entirely true. You can invest in a field, and if it is managed and cultivated sustainably, it will yield a return. That is not new. That is already happening. But if you want a return on investment, I'm afraid to say it's not going to be very easy. So if you want to be included in marine conservation as a businessman, you might just consider giving money, not investing it, but giving it. And so in that direction, to include you, to engage you, to convince you to give that money, I, as a conservation project manager, must have guarantees that you will have impact. Your money will be used with impact. So what we need to do as conservation managers is provide guarantees that the money will have an impact, because the problem is for funders is that very often they can't see the impact of their money, and they need reassurance there. So we need to reassure them on that. And there's a whole process. But we can talk about that over a glass of something.
I'm sorry, we have to go a little bit ahead and have pressure from here around. The last question, I think, can go to Ecosys. The question, so it's about the monitoring, so of one area. Is it also done on 8 no-talk zones? Do you have a global vision?
Yeah, actually, that was the purpose of this project, is to put all these areas evenly spread on our coast, all together in a network, to be able to, benefit of the positive point of one to the other, and so on, to also get some sort of kind of like the on land corridors, green corridors between protected zone for the fishes, because the fishes are moving. So that's the whole idea. So far, we're in the process of analyzing the data. So I'm not going to be able to say, okay, yeah, it's good or bad or whatever. So it's going to be a long-term process and analysis. But that's exactly the point. Putting all these MPAs together in the same network, instead of looking at each MPA separately.
Okay, so I think it's good if we also conclude on here and take the time to exchange all together with a little drink, little one. So just to wrap up, I think we can say that ultimately comprehensive conservation seeks to create a balance between the human developments and of course the protection of the ecosystems they rely on. It recognizes that these two objectives are mutually intertwined, as you said.
And by protecting marine ecosystems, we can build more resilient communities that are better able to adapt to the challenges of a changing climate.
Yes, and by empowering coastal populations, we can build more resilient communities, or if we prefer, populations that are better able to adapt to the challenges of the changing climate. And you were supposed to conclude, to a rapidly evolving ocean environment. So yes, thank you again for your participation. You ready after that? Yeah. Okay. So I just hold on. I would like to thank a few people, of course, for you, the speakers. You're coming from different places, from Université Côte, but from Bordeaux, from Lyon, and so thanks a lot to have shared that, not only with your students in class, but also with you. Thanks you to the Fondation Prince Albert II, to the Monaco Ocean Week organization, and especially Olivier Storelli, who helped a lot, the Yacht Club here, and the event with especially Raphaël Chiampo. Thank you for the translator and for your professional work with some challenges sometimes. And so I really want to thank the UCA Mares team. So thanks a lot. We are really lucky because here we have Sarah Sergi, who has not only with a PhD in marine conservation, apparently it's good to manage television production. And also Cristal Moreno, because she's also part of the Mares coordination, and apparently she has also other skills. You ready, Cristal? You have to share that here. That will be, yes. So at the same time that we were talking, Cristal, well, I think we say hello to everyone. So maybe, Cristal, you're a little bit shy to come, but you will see here that we have the sum up with science, economics, communities, education all together. And that's good that we can work all together. So thanks a lot, everyone. And let's go for a drink. It can be inside and also a little bit outside. Looking forward to exchange with you. Merci beaucoup à vous d'avoir été présents ici et en ligne et online. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, we did. That's amazing. Why were you in Arizona? But why? Oh, okay, wow. Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Bonjour. Attends, je fais.